this is a new way of working that has impacted positively the outcome of our product creation. Let's continue to drive it.
Welcome everyone to another episode at Around Design. Today we have two amazing guests, Cheresse Thornhill-Goldson and Jessica Smith, the two founders of S.E.E.D. So I'll let both of them introduce themselves because they'll do a better job than me. So Cheresse, over to you.
Yeah, so I'm Cheresse Thornhill-Goldson, very excited to be here. I always love talking about design, one of my very favorite subjects, and to be able to chat a little bit about, the work that we've done with S.E.E.D thus far. I've been in the footwear design industry now going on my 16th year, which is actually very scary to say. But I'm very excited about, where my career has gone and more excited about the work we're doing now and where we're headed next. So I'll pass it over to Jessica.
All right, thank you. Hello, everyone. Jessica Smith. So I've been in the space of the intersection between industry and education. So using educational pathways in terms of allowing designers to have more access to the field in general, specifically underrepresented individuals. So most recently with S.E.E.D women and women of color. And so I spent the last 6 years building up the S.E.E.D program at Adidas, and also have recently stepped outside to make sure that we can expand opportunities for underrepresented individuals in this space as well.
So yeah, it's really great to have you here because S.E.E.D is doing something really different in a way. It's really just, you guys have picked something very, very specific, like a very specific type of person that you want to bring into the industry that is quite necessary. And you've realized that, there's certain barriers that they need to overcome. And so how do you help them overcome those barriers in a very quick amount of time, as opposed to just kind of like, having to get people to go through 16 years of career like you, Cheresse. So it would be really great to understand what is it that you're doing at S.E.E.D. How are you thinking about the formation of these women so that they can go into the industry and have an impact straight away?
Yeah, Jessica, I think it'd be great, if you want to start maybe with the premise of S.E.E.D and the work that you've done within your career and how S.E.E.D is really answering, some of those problems that you saw emerging in our industry.
Of course. So I spent the first 6 years of my career focusing on leadership development in colleges and institutions. So at UCLA and Columbia University as an administrator and an instructor. And I was really focused and committed to underrepresented individuals in that space to say, how could we make sure that the outcomes that they desire for their lives post-college are something that they achieve? And so then I decided to move into the industry space, into the footwear industry on the other side of things for Fortune 100 companies and manage global early career talent programs. And so a big piece of my work has been, what does it take to enter the industry? And how do we develop individuals to be ready? And so when I was working within the traditional higher education to early career pathway, as I was going into the classrooms and as I was working with our design leadership to bring in talent, I noticed on both sides there were a lot of individuals that were missing in those spaces. And so as I spent time in the field looking at different ways to hack the system, to remove barriers, to make it easier for all individuals who want to become designers in the space and creatives in the space have an opportunity to do so. And so spent some time working within the traditional system to try to bring more equity, and it was just too hard. I mean, we're talking about big institutions that have legacies, a way of operating. And so the unique piece is on the industry side, there is a bit more nimbleness. When you're talking about design and innovation, those are individuals who are used to prototyping and testing and trying new things. And so that's where the genesis for S.E.E.D came from. As I was working in this traditional model, I was looking actually at the tech space, and tech had an extreme need to build more diversity in their workforce. and they had to do so quickly because of the numbers that were in their organizations. And we also know that there's a business case for diversity. In addition to it being a good and nice thing, there's also, when we talk about innovation and innovation's impact on business outcomes, we have to have diverse and inclusive teams, especially in the product creation space where we're designing for individuals who we might not see represented around us. And so Tech was taking some ownership into building those pathways outside of the formal education system, and that's where the genesis for S.E.E.D came from. And so the idea was, together with design leadership, to devise a 2-year program that would do in 2 years what an institution does it at 4, with the goal of first pipelining and giving more access to the least represented. And that's why we started with women and women of color, because we could count on 2 hands how many BIPOC women of color existed in the country when we started S.E.E.D. And since starting S.E.E.D, we've increased that number by over 100%. And so S.E.E.D serves as a university alternative pathway into footwear design for BIPOC women. And, we had to get really creative around how do we do in 2 years what others do in 4. And that's where we had to start revolutionizing not only the design process, but the design education process. And so some of the ways we've been able to do that is look at hands-on learning and open source instruction. So when you learn design formally in an institution, you're working in a very theoretical environment with educators. There's a really unique and beautiful piece around being situated in a corporation and being able to work on real live briefs with products that go to market with real world constraints. It's also beautiful to be able to have a really wide network of employees and people in creatives outside of the company who can come in and teach as well. But I think the real unlock that we've discovered, leadership is something that has been something I've been committed to from the beginning of my career. And I'm actually a doctoral candidate at USC because I've studied who are the people that are able to accelerate their careers. What are the skills and capabilities that allow them to unlock their potential? And the striking thing is it's not taught anywhere. It's not taught if you go to formal school. It's not taught if you're in a corporation. Many of us don't have access to development opportunities to upskill ourselves. Podcasts like this, are just emerging and starting to exist. But how do you get the skills that you need that you don't have to continue to grow your career? And honestly, when we look at the skills for the future for jobs that don't exist yet, they're not technical skills. They're skills like communication and persuasion. They're skills like design thinking. They're skills like confidence. How do you stand up and represent your idea in authentically who you are? And so that's been one of the most beautiful pieces that we've brought into S.E.E.D is really looking at a different skill set that allows our designers to be really impactful in a short period of time. And so the model of the program is in year 1, it's building a foundation of skills and knowledge on the design and leadership side. And then in year 2, we start to immerse our students more into actual design teams and less time spent with the S.E.E.D cohort, if you will, all with the intent of placing them in full-time jobs after 2 years, which we have successfully done. And they are all thriving in different business units that they've been placed in so far.
And, from my point of view and perspective, I've been really fortunate and blessed to have been able to take a pretty traditional path into the footwear design industry where I studied design in high school. In South Florida, I was able to attend a design high school that actually specialized in industrial design and fashion and architecture, which is something that is really unheard of, especially for people, from underserved communities. So to have had that early access to design, then to be able to have the resources to attend College for Creative Studies in Detroit, Michigan, and study industrial design there. Then I started my career at Nike out of college and designing footwear for some of the best athletes in the world. It's a very, I would say, charmed path that a lot of people just don't have access to from any community. And so when I look back across, my time in the industry, I always think about, the fact that I was always the only woman on my design teams. And quite often the only person of color on my design teams. And, S.E.E.D and what the program's able to do, I wish it existed for my friends, my friends who wanted to be in this industry and have this type of career, but just didn't have the same access to the education because of a plethora of other reasons. I'm wishing this program existed for them. And then our industry would look very different. So I'm very proud of the work that we're doing now. Jessica spoke a bit about, how the program is structured. And I started along, in the beginning when we launched the program in 2020. I moved from South Florida to Brooklyn as a design director to really lead our students through the process of creating products and working on those timelines that you really wouldn't experience in a college setting, right? Because the projects you're working on, they aren't real or backed by a brand or a budget. You can do anything, right? And the fact that our designers are working within the real constraints of a business, it's making them better designers, and we are able to accelerate their growth in that short amount of time.
Yeah, well, I mean, Cheresse, definitely you were lucky to be able to go into a high school that was focused on industrial design. Not everybody has that in general. But yeah, it's really great to hear, Jessica, like the story of how it all came together, and obviously how you two are putting your brains together to make sure that these women are having the impact that they need to be having in such a small amount of time. And so something that you spoke about is skills, and Cheresse, you and I spoke about this like offline, people calling them soft skills, or really just like invisible skills, as I would like to call them, because in a lot of cases those are the things that you don't get to learn when you go to school. You don't get to see when you're trying to find information online and so on, because they are invisible. They are things that you learn over time, but to be able to learn them over time, you need to be able to get the opportunity to go into the industry and learn them. And so that's the hardest thing of them all. So you teaching at S.E.E.D how to get these skills, how to become leaders, how to communicate. And that's, I would say, one of the most important things as a designer, to learn how to communicate to very different people. So, as designers, we love to think about new ideas and to push the boundaries and to think about, the next big thing or the product that is going to be, most useful for someone or solve a problem and so on. But we tend to get trapped in this bubble of, I'm going to make this really cool, whatever it is, right? A sneaker, a car, a shoe, like a chair, whatever it might be. But we don't get to, it's really hard for us to bring it out and get others to join that same idea, or it takes a really long time and a lot of explanation and a lot of conversations that happen in different ways, whether their conversations are happening through just more visual mediums as we're used to on doing it as designers, or conversations that need to be happening in another way because you're talking to other people in the business that might not necessarily be visual communicators, right? Like there's this relation between design and business that always needs to happen when you're in the industry. And of course you don't get taught to do that at school. Like that's kind of like, you don't get to realize that until you're like actually working. So I really want to hear from you guys. How is it that you are giving the students the tools that they need, or the knowledge that they need to be able to interact with different people within the business, so that their ideas can get across, whether it's, developers, people from the business side of things, marketeers, etc.
I can take this one. It's really immersion, and creating a real work experience for the students. And we're really fortunate to actually sit in an office with other practicing designers within the brand, so that our students aren't off and isolated and having an experience that isn't real. They're in the office with the other designers, and they're exposed to designers and how they work on the day-to-day, and they are actually designers in the brand working on those products that are going to market. So they have meetings with product marketing just like any other designer in the organization does. They have meetings with development, and they understand cost breakdowns and the dates and gates and what needs to happen at any particular point. So they're interfacing with those teams. And they are also able to understand how those partners are being measured, right? And I think, design has always had a contentious relationship with product marketing and development, because we're somewhat stuck in the middle, where product marketing, they really care about the business and the consumer. And I don't think there's enough sharing happening between design and product marketing. So we don't necessarily understand each other, and we really don't speak the same language. And then vice versa on the development side, right? Development is really charged with hitting the margin targets and making sure the product's manufacturable, and there aren't any bleeding ankles through wear testing. But again, like, there isn't enough sharing and integration of taking co-ownership over those aspects that make the product successful. And I think that's historically why there's been so much contention between the functions. Within S.E.E.D, we actually expose all of that to our students, so they're aware of these dynamics that are pre-existing. So when they go into those meetings or those interactions with their counterparts, they understand how to navigate that and also take ownership over the other parts of the function and understand that they actually do play a role. So to your point earlier, we're building in a lot of the things that it takes designers years of hitting the wall to understand how to work better and be more collaborative. They're learning that on the front end, which again accelerates their growth and adoption of the products that they create, right? Because they understand how to speak the language of their counterparts, and they have shared ownership in the product success. So collaboration, creativity, courage, confidence, compassion. We have a list of 8 C's. That's really the core of our leadership and design curriculum that our students are mastering. It's those softer skills that you spoke about, and that's really ensuring, their success now in the program and thereafter.
And I will share, in addition to the applied piece and the leadership philosophy and design philosophy that Cheresse spoke about, 2 kind of sharp points in our curriculum. The first is around, one of the C's is communication, and really that persuasion piece. How do you get your counterparts to buy into your idea, to trust it? And pulling in kind of that open source approach. We actually had a really beautiful opportunity to bring in an open source instructor, one of the best storytellers in the business, who happens to also be have been a brand partner for Adidas, in Jonah Hill. And Jonah Hill came in, and we co-created an 8-week course with him that all of our students got to go through to talk about what are those critical components of any story that you can pull in to be able to articulate your story, as well as the product narrative behind what you want others to buy into and co-create with you. The other piece that we spend a lot of time in when we talk about communication and storytelling, it's one thing to have the tools to say, this is how I craft a really compelling story. It's a whole other piece to build the confidence to be able to tell that story. And that's really where we start with our students, is to build that confidence. And confidence a lot of times comes down to identity. And there's a lot of identity work that we do, particularly thinking about the fact that our students still might be the only woman on their team, the only BIPOC individual. So how do you, being at the very beginning of your career, maybe not having shared identities with other people around you, have enough confidence to stand behind your idea in that space? And that comes with knowing who you are, but building your self-efficacy around your design capability to say, I am a great designer and I do have a point of view and perspective, and it doesn't have to be the same one. And how do I stand behind that in a way that is compelling? So confidence and communication are 2 core competencies that we spend a lot of time teaching and allowing the students to practice and gain more skills around. And I'm always so proud and excited when our team gets to start working with a new business unit, because from the beginning of their career, they're able to do some of the things that I see our design leaders struggle with, because they've never had that training and that space to be able to have that voice in a really confident way.
That's one of the most important things or unique things about S.E.E.D is, how do you teach someone to be able to just be themselves and bring that thing that they own as themselves in a way that it's not clashing, or it's not kind of like, pushing people away, because that's one of the biggest challenges in general for, I would say, for women, for example, or minorities. You sometimes need to be adapting to how the room looks like or how the room sounds like, so that your voice is heard, or at least it's not hurting other people's ears. So it would be really interesting to hear how are you pushing them to just be unique in their own way, but at the same time, they still need to somehow adapt or somehow figure out how their voice is going to be heard in the best way possible, so it doesn't get pushed back.
Something that comes to mind is the piece, two things. Cheresse does a fantastic job of teaching our students to learn their own design process. And so it's a very iterative piece that they come in to say, I might be a prototyper and I need to build something with my hands before I bring it onto screen. And so everyone has the space to build their own design process, which brings that confidence. The other piece that comes in with the curriculum is that empathy piece, that curiosity piece, and that around, I'm not designing for myself. I'm designing for a consumer in mind. And one of the really, and Cheresse talked about the fact that sometimes that comes in through marketing counterparts, but our students always start with deep consumer research. And when your ideas are rooted in fact and insights, it really gives our students a platform to get buy-in. So it's not objective, it's not their opinion. So it's really having a methodology that works to them, having an insight that is backed by facts, and then having the courage and confidence to stand up and present that idea that really is a process that they do over and over and over again, whether it's on briefs on products that are going to market or simulated briefs that Cheresse and the team work against. So those are just my initial thoughts. Cheresse, you might have some more.
We celebrate them from the beginning. We have a really, I would say, a strenuous evaluation process to identify who we bring into the program. But we try to reinforce to them always that there is something special and unique about them as individuals that no one else on the planet has, so that they know that they're operating from a place of overflow and not deficiency. Because I think sometimes when we come in and we look around and we don't identify with anyone else in the room, we always start to feel less than, or that we're missing something. So we try to impart that to our students on the beginning, that they have a one-up on others because they have a very unique point of view from their lived experiences, their culture, their own particular eye, the way in which they see color, or stories that resonate with them or that they've heard. So they have a creative toolbox. We kind of call it your creativity toolbox of experiences, thoughts, ideas, books, that you can pull from at any point, which is unique and special to you. So they know they're starting from an advantage standpoint. And then we just build upon that. We never really say, oh, you did that wrong. It just could have been done in a better way. Right. And I think it's the more that they are experienced different things. We also talk about the strengths in the group. So everyone has a different strength that we should see, identify, and then partner so that we can leverage and build upon each other's point of view. So we try to really celebrate everyone in the team, and so that we don't build that atmosphere that happens within design teams that you're trying to one up the person on your team. Like, no, everyone here is valid and has something special to bring, and then we all work together to solve these design problems together.
We keep hearing about speaking different languages, and I think a really important topic to talk about and to cover today is tools and ways of just being able to communicate with these people that are speaking very different languages. So there's so many intricacies that need to happen for this to actually be effective. Obviously, you are teaching the students to be, really sure of themselves and really understand who they are and come out like this. Jessica, you mentioned some students might be prototypers, some students might be sketchers, some students might be, maybe something else. But it would be really interesting to hear, how do you think about the tools that, these students are having to, or, in general, people in the industry are having to adopt to be able to at least speak a similar language? If there's anything that, you guys have found that that has really worked Right now we're going through a transition everywhere, right? After the pandemic, just the world changed, where we have teams that are distributed, we have people that are like working from different places in the world and so on. So, communication starts to become even more difficult, or I would say challenging. So, what are the things that you're seeing that are being implemented so that, product marketing is speaking with design and is speaking with development in a way that everybody's kind of like understanding themselves a little bit better? Or if there's nothing there, like if there's still kind of like a lot of work to do in that space.
Yeah. So from a tool standpoint, I always look at process because I think process is a tool. And we've talked about this earlier, making sure that everyone is involved in every part of the process, right? So when we're at the very beginning, even from a briefing standpoint, what I've loved about what we've been able to do in S.E.E.D is actually partner on the briefing process with any one of the business units that we're working with. So rarely do we get a fully baked brief. It is always collaborative, even on the projects that we've proposed, and that's been great for us. We've been able to propose a project that is then adopted by the business versus the other way around. So being very inclusive on the front end and collaborating on the very front end ensures that everyone is on the same page and speaking the same language as we go throughout each other subsequent part of the process, to sketching, ideating the stories that we're going to tell, the color palettes. Is all very collaborative from beginning to end. So that's also ensuring that everyone's holding hands and everyone feels a ownership stake in the product versus design off doing their own thing and trying to sell it back to the business, something that they don't actually need. So that's been really great. And then, of course, Gravity Sketch, right? So you all partnered with us on our first generation of students who then had the ability to learn, how to create concepts in this virtual space in the midst of a pandemic, right? Where everyone is in different rooms and spaces and continents. So Gravity Sketch has been really helpful for us, especially in that time where we weren't meeting consistently, that we can share our ideas and build and collaborate from there.
Something really important that you're saying is that it is the process, and 100% agree. When you're bringing the conversations to the beginning of the process, where you're just troubleshooting, problem solving together, then it's going to be really easy to just move the project in a way where everybody agrees. And that sometimes, or most of the times, doesn't happen because you end up having a very linear process, right? Like you have the people that come with the brief, you have the people that take the brief and start doing something with it, and then they try to sell it to these same people. But then you have kind of like the dream killers. I don't want to call them like this, but like the developers and the engineers and everybody that needs to make sure that these things can actually exist in the real world. Then they come and kind of like, change the design, and the designers are like, what is it that you're doing after all this work that I did? So you're talking about something really, really important, bringing the conversations to the beginning of the process, which I imagine it's not the easiest thing to do, right?
I think Jessica can speak about this one as well. Leading strategy for basketball for a long time. I think you have some insights on that one.
Yeah. I mean, it's been beautiful, even in what Cheresse talked about. I mean, it's not just bringing people to the beginning of the process, but it's having consistent and ongoing checkpoints. And we've also found that having development counterparts throughout the end-to-end process means that they are pitching solutions to enable the creative process along the way, to say, I don't know if that would be feasible, but we do have this capability, or check out this, or, and so it's the developers are actually providing tools and insights and opportunities along the way to enable the creative ideas that our design teams have had. And to Cheresse's point, having marketing there along the full way too, it actually hasn't made it harder. There's so much efficiency that's built into the process by starting together and continuing the journey together, and then by the end, everyone's excited and has that buy-in along the way. So I think shifting the process can save a lot of time, and I've seen it work the opposite way a lot. And it's so hard. Time is limited. And I think that that's why people end up working in their silos, is because it's like, I don't have time for another meeting. Or that language kind of miscommunication, or even the trust that's necessary. But I think that if someone's bold enough to propose a new way of working and to pilot and test it with their counterparts, the only thing that will come out of it is a better outcome than the way we've been trained to do it all along, which is in that siloed nature.
That's why I love our 8 C's. And, if we can rattle them off, and they wouldn't be topics or skills you would associate when you think about a designer or a developer, quite frankly, right? And I think that's why our students are doing so well. But also, it's not just, designers that need it. Everyone in the business, they need those other skills, again, because it's going to ensure collaboration, understanding, persuasion, like when developers are allowed to be creative, because I don't think they actually see themselves as creative. When we create a culture of creativity, saying that anyone on the team has it and can use it as a tool, it gives them the license to propose those creative solutions. But I don't think they've ever been, told that they're creative and able to provide creative solutions. So they also need to be, retaught as well, to say you're a great problem solver, right? Like, you have the ability to bring something to this project early on versus just when it's time to hand off to the factory, right? They need to be enabled to be creative in part of the process as well. Same with marketing, right? Their job doesn't end when the briefs hand off. They also need a forum to give creative ideas, or at least look at things in a new way, and constantly go back to the consumers and continuously bringing insights as the process is going, versus just saying, oh, well, we've only done research for this season, so here you go. It should be continuous, right? And it should be an ever evolving process, not, oh, I've handed off, now I'm off to, the next season that's coming. So
Yeah, 100%. I love what you're saying. We tend to think about the designers as the only creatives in the team, which is kind of like a flawed thought. Like, everyone is creative in their own way, and everybody's problem solving and trying to figure out how to make this product the best product it can be. And so by giving them the power to think that they're creatives, it's just, yeah, I imagine it's kind of like starting to become a bit of a game changer, because then you're having truly multiple brains thinking together, try to get to that outcome, as opposed to, it's on you, you figure it out. I have a lot of great ideas, but I can't really share them because you're the one that has to have the ideas, kind of thing. But is this a S.E.E.D thing, or is this kind of like just something that is happening company-wide, that like it's starting to just kind of like completely change the way that you guys are working?
I think we've been fostering that with our team, and it's something that is part of our culture. I think the brand also has a lot of it as well, like the 3 C's, creativity, collaboration, and confidence has always been a leadership framework that the entire brand has ascribed to. So it isn't just happening within our team, but what's beautiful about what we're doing is we're teaching it to our designers on the front end of their design experience in a corporation, right? So now it becomes embedded. It isn't something they're trying to now adopt on top of all the other work that they have to do, where it is now an option versus a must-have. They see it as a must-have because that's how they've been taught early on. And then we can see when they go out into the business, they're operating in a different way, which is then has the opportunity to influence that entire team.
How do you get, for example, developers to start changing their minds? Or, we've spoken about offline, like changing. Designers are always looking to change the status quo. Business people are always trying to keep it the same. But, like, how do you get people to just shake it up a little bit and start thinking in a different way and start kind of like jumping into this way of doing things?
I think part of it is just giving them the opportunity, allowing them to have a seat at the table. And then I think that once you find those core people or those core teams or those core business units that once you provide this new way are really excited about it, And then that becomes kind of an opportunity to have stakeholders that are bought in, that then can kind of influence the rest of their community, their developer community, their marketing community, to say, this is a new way of working that has impacted positively the outcome of our product creation. Let's continue to drive it. But I think more than not, I found that when we create a seat and a space for someone, they're willing to step in. Not all partners are ready for it, and so you might have to trial and test a little bit. But once you do find those key stakeholders, they're helpful stewards to kind of bring that mindset shift to their respective areas as well.
Yeah, I always see the designers as a catalyst, primarily because we sit in the middle of the process where we kind of have to go upstream sometimes and then downstream. And when we get products back from the factory, right, we still have to do the work to adjust it. So we are in the best, possible position to keep re-engaging our partners. Right. Once we've gone through the process and now we start to get products back, we should be the ones now scheduling the meetings and bringing everyone else. Like, we should be the ones to set the table, because we want to ensure that that process continues. Right. So it is almost on us. And I know some designers may feel like, oh, that's not my job, or it's another thing to do. But I think in terms of learning how to grow as a designer, how to grow your influence and your leadership, I always see people, wanting to figure out, well, how do I grow? How do I move to that next level as a designer? But it really is about leadership. Your product design is going to get better and better and better the more that you do it right. You're inherently becoming better over time. But you also have to start to become a design leader. That's how you get into design leadership. So it isn't about, oh, my product sold, millions of pairs or whatever. If no one else on your team wants to talk to you or work with you, that isn't going to work, right? You're not going to be put into a design leadership role. So as you keep growing, it's really about establishing your own leadership identity on your team and including others and setting the table for your partners to feel like they can be partners with you on this product, that you're creating. I think that really makes the difference.
I think one of the things, there are so many simple things, whether it's, describing kind of how you're going to work together and setting those terms together with the team that you're working on. There's also this piece around, I think, clarifying roles and responsibilities and decision owners. When you're thinking of the triad and particularly the relationship between market and design, I think it's really important to say yes, we're going to take feedback from all entities, but who owns which decisions at which stage of the process, and clarifying that and aligning on that up front, I think can release a lot of the friction that can happen further down along the road as well.
Yeah, it's a really important thing for team working to be able to just understand who is who and what is everyone responsible for, which sometimes we don't. I mean, we end up kind of staying in the very surface level, which is kind of connected to what you were saying, Cheresse, of really understanding how you're going to be a good team player, but also how you're going to be growing as a leader, or taking that route into really understanding how to better communicate. At the end of the day, it's all communication, it's all collaboration, it's all how are you helping each other get to that result, because ultimately it's the same result that everybody wants. So it's really, I think it would be really interesting to hear, and we've spoken about this offline, about this route towards leadership, or this route towards where is your role actually going? Where are you going as a person, within the organization? Because sometimes we end up, when we're growing up, we go to school, we go to university, we have this very clear path until we get the job. Then we get the job and that's it, especially as designers, because we're so immersed in our creation. We are so passionate about making things that we tend to forget that there's an evolution that also needs to happen, so that we continue to be relevant and continue to have an impact in the organization that we're working at. So, what are some of the tips or some of the kind of useful things that people should be thinking about to be able to continue developing themselves to be able to grow in an organization as a designer?
One of the things we've been able to do, actually really proud that Adidas has created an open education platform called Adidas Community, and we've been able to co-create a piece of our curriculum on that platform. And one of the pieces of that curriculum is actually career mapping. And career mapping is something we do with all of our students. And it's really looking at building out a plan, a potential plan for yourself 5 to 10 years. What are your desirable roles that you want to have? And then spending time learning what are the key capabilities necessary at each of those different stages. And thankfully now, once you can map out, this is the tentative roadmap that I want to see, and here are the skills that I need to obtain, and knowledge, and experience that I need to have along the way, then you can start to execute. And in terms of new knowledge, thankfully, we live in a day and age where you can access knowledge and information freely that you never could before. As far as experiences, you can start to really advocate for yourself to say, are there mentors at other stages along the process that I can job shadow, that I can have coffee chats with? Maybe that your company provides stretch assignments. And I would say be so entrepreneurial and motivated around owning your career. A lot of times people want to invest in you, they just don't know how. And so you have to do that upfront legwork. But as far as getting new experiences that will prove to individuals that you're ready for that next level, there are so many creative ways to be able to do things like that. Take on additional projects. Maybe you have an external kind of hustle that you do that builds capabilities in that space. So those are some of the tips that I would say is just be really hungry. Make sure that you're continuously learning and being strategic about what you need to learn, having experience that prove evidence that you have mastery of those skills that are necessary at the next level. And even if you build a plan that isn't what really takes shape, you're continuing to grow, get better, build your toolkit, and learn along the way. Cheresse,
Yeah,
you might have some fun
for
thoughts too.
sure. What you're talking about, I didn't learn that until my 5th year in the industry, right? And one could argue at that point I should have been at the intermediate level, but I was finding myself just still at the latter stage of entry level because I didn't learn those things. Again, that's leadership. Taking ownership over your career and your trajectory isn't something I'd ever heard before, and I think traditionally we're always looking to our manager or whoever is above us at the time to tell us where we should go next. I had never really been empowered to actually take ownership over my career and to be able to craft it and feel like I had the power to craft it. It wasn't until the 5th year and the affinity group I was a part of at the role and at the brand I was at the time, invested in a few of us over in a course of a week. We called it, Leadership Week. And at that point, I got a chance to actually work on a career map. They brought in executives, to speak to us, and we learned about their career path and how they'd grown. And so during that week, that was a whole unlock for me where I felt empowered coming out of that and felt like I can own my career. I don't have to wait for my manager to tell me when I'm ready to go to the next job. I can do that work myself, and I can go look at our job site and see what's available and then shoot my shot because I felt confident enough because I had been doing the work myself. I wouldn't have known that though had I not been a part of that affinity group that then invested in us in that way. So back to what we're doing in S.E.E.D, we're building all of that leadership into the beginning of our designers' learning journey. That's going to have a huge impact on their pathway forward. So if I was going to give anyone advice, I would say take complete ownership over your life and your career. You can't outsource that to anyone else because really it's no one else's responsibility but your own. And then leverage the people around you, right? Seek out mentors, to Jessica's point, set up time with people. I found that, everyone's not as scary as they seem to be. And especially on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great platform where everyone on it who's on there, most people are there, not to just seek, but also to give of themselves, right? So I think it's just being curious, another one of our 8 C's, asking questions, reading books on certain subject matters, and then looking for ways to grow outside of this myopic lane as a designer. And I think the more our world changes, you have to start adding different tools to your toolbox that maybe don't seem like they're relevant or like design tools or capabilities. We need to start adding other things from other functions or businesses to our toolbox to be better creatives and designers if we feel like we want to stay, in our lane, so to speak, but we have to grow and like one up ourselves for sure.
I do have a story that is resonating while Cheresse is talking with one of our students. And so in our second generation of students, they complete the program this coming July. But they're also at a place where they're spending time with design teams up to 50 to 100% of their time. And this role became available, and again, one of our students still had like 8 months left in the program, but this role became available on a team that she was interning with, essentially. And she was like, she found out about the role. She looked at the qualifications. She had the confidence to say, no one else is going to get this role. I'm going to get this role. And before I could reach out to the hiring manager and Cheresse could reach out to the hiring manager and other teammates could reach out to the hiring manager, she's like, no, I've got this. And she's like, I'm going to make it undeniable that I'm the best person for them to hire in this job. And in terms of the work that she was doing with that team, she was delivering over and above. She was taking on and observing other gaps and areas of work that she could contribute to outside of what had been assigned for her. And, only a year and a half into our program, she landed that full-time job on that team because she showed confidence, because she was communicated and was persuasive, and because she took that ownership that Cheresse was talking about. And so it was really beautiful to watch her navigate and we all three were like, oh, there's this open role, let's help. And she completely took it on her own and is so happy. And the team receiving her loves her. It's pretty amazing for them. And they went through a formal process, reviewed all of the applications that were submitted on the career site, went through interview process, and at the end of the day, selected one of our students because of a lot of the capabilities and skills that we've been talking about throughout our time here, which was just always the reason for why we do this work.
That's a great story. And like, it's so good that it was like just her doing it. Mm-hmm. Even though you would have been able to help a little bit, she was just like on it. Mm-hmm. I'm curious to hear, what are the rest of the C's? Because you keep talking about these 8 C's. You mentioned some, but what are the others?
Curiosity, compassion, courage, creativity, confidence, collaboration, community, and communication. And they're not random. Yes, we started with a framework that existed in the company, but they were actually developed by doing research against what are the most desired skills for the future workforce, as outlined by LinkedIn and other notable kind of firms that, look at this on an ongoing basis. So they're definitely the most desirable skills and capabilities for not just designers, but the workforce of the future.
Yeah, 100%. You mentioned how, these teams are starting to become way more diverse with so many different types of roles. Designers need to start thinking about like becoming a bit of not generalists, but really understanding different fields, because things are becoming so specialized or starting to mix so much that you need to start becoming this kind of like weird breed of designer, creative, but also like know-it-all almost, or like someone that is able to just, and we've always been like that, designers are always curious, you're always learning new things, but like being open to learn things that you would have never expected that you needed to learn and being okay with it. So, part of the C's that you have in there, obviously collaboration and communication are key. You have curiosity as well, you have curiosity, and then you have, I forgot this one, but it's kind of like
courage.
Well, courage is compassion. Yeah, exactly. Compassion. Courage is an important one.
I knew that was the one that you were picking out, because I think that's the one that we would just really question, why is that on the list? But it goes such a long way, not only in our process in terms of being able to express empathy when we talk to consumers and really understand their plight, because the products we're creating actually does serve a need, and I see design as a service. So to be able to identify with the person, but also when you're working with your teammates across the other functions, just being compassionate goes a long way. And I think that's what makes our students different as well, because they're not just coming in screaming from the mountaintop how great of a designer they are and what a pleasure it would be for the team on the other end to have them, but they are also curious about what are some of your needs, right? Like, where are the gaps in your own business or on your own team, and how can I be of service to you, right? And make your job easier as a design director, or fill some of the gap areas that are maybe existing on that design team, and being adaptable to service that need in the moment, right? That takes compassion. That actually takes allowing yourself to somewhat take a back seat against your own agenda and service your team, right? And just understand that, okay, some of the things that I want to get done will, once I service these other gap areas and solidify the foundation of the team, then we can build from there. And I think a lot of design directors and managers or leaders are looking for that, because it really doesn't really exist. You don't see that too often in someone you're bringing into the team, much less a creative, right? Because we a lot of times have our own agenda.
Yeah, I would say it's kind of like the old way versus the new way, right? Like, designers are like known for being very much like having their own agenda, their own like big egos, competitive and so on. But the world is changing, the industry is changing towards a better place, I would say, a more collaborative place where products are going to end up becoming better products, because there's more collaboration, more communication, more tools that are allowing us to communicate and collaborate. Well, thank you so much, Cheresse and Jessica, for your time. It's been great having you at Around Design.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.